today's episode of Vice Versa, Tesla's 8,000-ton Cybertruck casting machine, Tesla's Semi should be delivering Pepsi later this year, and a little twist, Intel is going to start building other companies' chips, and a big win for EV makers selling direct to customers. As usual, I'm joined by Ricky Roy. How you doing, Ricky?
Doing good, Matt. Doing good. Had a good week. I had my vaccination, my first round of vaccination shots on yesterday.
Congratulations.
And thank you. Yeah, I wasn't really planning on it, but I have a couple of trips coming up, and it was just, we got lucky with timing. And apparently my BMI, which, worked in my favor because I guess I'm fat enough that I qualify. So what was your video this week, by the way?
It was about Hyperloop. I was just fascinated by the whole technology behind that, so I thought it'd be fun to put a video together on that. Wasn't really about if it's going to happen or not. It was more of just kind of this is really kind of interesting technology and an interesting thing that they're trying to do. Will they succeed? I don't know, but it's a fun video.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of in the same realm of not sure if it's feasible or timeframes, but man, would it be cool and do we need it? I did nuclear fusion this week, which I know you've done before, but yeah. We'll have links to both of our videos this week, as always, in the description. And so glad you guys could make it. And thank you for joining us live.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start with our very first story. And this is one that Matt and I are pretty excited about, which is that Tesla now has secured orders for the world's first 8,000-ton casting machine. So this is pretty amazing. And it's actually an evolution from what they've started to do with the Model Y rear section, which is a 6,000-ton casting machine. So really, typically when you build a car, and this is Idra is the company, an Italian company that will be the ones to provide the machinery. So typically when you build a car, let's see if we can find a video here. So typically when you build a car, you'd have a bunch of smaller parts that are cast, and then you'd either weld them together or rivet them. And the end result is maybe a dozen or 100 parts that you have to then kind of put together. But when you can cast an entire assembly for the Cybertruck, then that means that you could basically just have a machine big enough. You'd have this mold kind of like this, but I mean, you can imagine how much bigger it would be in real life. And you could build parts at a scale that would dwarf anything else that any other automaker is doing, which always brought me to my first question, which is, we think of Tesla as far as like being so far ahead with things like software, but and we think of them as a tech company, but this is hardcore engineering, and Tesla's the first company to be doing this. So it makes me wonder, like, why haven't GM and Ford, why has nobody else figured this out or tried this? Which is kind of my first point. So anybody in the audience who knows Sandy Munro or has a has a contact with him, I'd love to have him on the show to discuss, but really incredible stuff, record-breaking stuff. Now, if you remember, there was that little fire. It was around, I think, the 6,000-ton machine that they use in Fremont for the Model Y. So this is all pretty new stuff, but this is kind of an evolution of where they are today with the Model Y machine. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, this stuff gets me so excited. It's like this is engineering amplified 1,000 times. It's so cool what they're able to do with this. And I was saying to you earlier, it's like this is basically like building Matchbox cars life size, which is so freaking cool that they know how to do this. They can do this kind of stuff scaled up. And you ask a really good question of like, why has nobody done this before? My one guess, it's just a wild guess, is just the expenditure of doing this, where all these other companies are totally invested in the way they're doing it. And it would be a huge expense and a shift to go into this more risky path where they're taking the cheaper path and the path they've already invested money into, where Tesla is still spinning up, building brand new factories so they can be a little more experimental, push the envelope a little bit more, and try things like this. And they're also a first principles, question everything, come at the best path for this solution for what we need to do. So this kind of technology is just really cool. I also mentioned to you earlier that the Idra video, when they did their press release video where the CEO is talking about it, you could tell he was beyond proud in that video when he was talking about it, because it's like they already did the 6,000-ton machine, which was the largest in the world. And now they're coming out with an 8,000-ton, and it's just like he looked like he was just like, like a proud father. It was really kind of a fun video to watch, just to see this guy basically bragging, and he has every right to brag. And Tesla should be very excited too about pushing the envelope here.
Yeah, it just seems like if there's anything cool or new or innovative, it just all comes from one company, and we want to cover other companies, like so
Yes,
we hope that other people will do cool stuff
please.
and not lobby Congress. But anyway, so this is we were talking about this before, but this is one of those engineering problems that brings with it like a slew of other problems you have to solve as well. You can imagine you're pouring like molten aluminum into like a cast, which is one thing if you have a mold that's pretty small and it'll form all the cavities and fill in nicely. But something that big, I mean, they were talking about the sides and the kind of the wheel well of the car and all the ribbings and all the kind of load bearing members. That is an incredibly complicated part. So the cost up front to build a machine like this is astronomical. It's way more expensive than what like other automotive makers are doing. But there's other challenges. Like for one, Tesla actually had to come up with their own aluminum for this because the aluminum that they were using in the past wouldn't have worked for this application. It wasn't strong enough, and you can't heat treat it after the fact because you would risk potentially warp, and it wouldn't take over this part to get scrapped. So they had to come up with their own alloys of aluminum. Alloy is a word I was blanking on before, but they had to come up with their own like metallurgy, which is an entire other division that Tesla's really getting hip to with some of the Starship stainless steel and Cybertruck stuff that they were working on. So incredible engineering, and you can imagine that the end result of this actually saves them a lot of room on their factory floor. So this machine is like the biggest machine of all time. Like no machine man has ever made is bigger. But the end result of that machine is you actually get like 30% of your floor space back. You don't have to have all these different parts. You don't have to then have them all brought together and assembled together and welding robots that have to weld or tack or rivet these things. And so oddly, it's total first principles thinking. It's like, let's spend a ton of money on this wild and crazy idea. And if it works, like, the end result will be really cool. One question I have though is if you get like rear-ended, something like that happens,
Yeah.
this entire part is scrapped. Whereas otherwise, maybe you have like 8 or 9 parts and you have to just you take one off, cut it, and weld a new version to it. But this part is basically anything happens and you scrap it,
Yeah.
which isn't the worst thing if you can just recycle it quickly and they make them very very fast. It's all one part of aluminum, so you can easily recycle it. But yeah, what do you think on some of the cons of it?
That would be one of my big questions. I'd want to talk to like say brought up Sandy Monroe. It's like love to talk to him because I wonder if it sounds like it would be like a really expensive proposition to fix damage, but I wonder if it's not. I wonder if it actually might make it easier just to basically or swapping out the entire back end with a brand new part. I don't know if it actually makes it easier or harder. I'm really curious. It in theory makes it stronger, so maybe it's more resistant to getting damage like that. I'd want to talk to somebody like Sandy. Uh, but I'm glad you also brought up the material science because Tesla's material scientists team cannot be understated. And clearly there's a synergy between the material scientists that work on SpaceX and Tesla because they're doing some crazy stuff with metals and for things that can withstand re-entering an atmosphere and then taking that same stuff and they're going to put it on a Cybertruck. It's like there's clearly some next level things they're doing when it comes to material science. I don't see that coming out of GM or Ford, but could be wrong. But that's another reason maybe why nobody else is going the route of these gigantic casting machines because it's not just as simple as just plug in a casting machine. There's like 1,000 things that ripple off of that you have to figure out.
There's also somebody mentioned that insurance does not pay to repair. So there's some questions I have around kind of the cost to repair parts that do this. But the other part of this is this lends itself really nicely to the structural battery pack. So traditional Teslas until now have had battery kind of packs that you slide into the car. So the pack itself has some rigidity. It has more metal and more mass that has to be required. And then you put these packs together. The future of Tesla is going to be imagine like this middle structural part that has kind of a top and bottom sheet, and the batteries would go into it and be kind of glued in, and the batteries itself would act as kind of a structural part. So it wouldn't just be battery energy storage; it would also be like structural member. So when you do that, to my mind, it becomes like the iPhone, where everything's kind of soldered. It's all one piece, which has a lot of pros, maybe some cons. Like if you had a couple of bad cells or something, I don't know how you would really address that very easily. But give it to Tesla for just rethinking all this. And I remember in that video that Elon had at Battery talking about this, he doesn't even think companies that aren't doing this, where it's structural battery, he doesn't even think companies that don't do that will even be competitive in terms of like price and like energy density and stuff like that. Because you can get rid of a ton of extra filler stuff that doesn't actually give you range.
Yep. It's, if you think of, I don't know if it's like an exact analogy, but think about the phones. It's like their phones used to have replaceable batteries, and nobody does that anymore because it's probably more cost effective and just as good just to seal everything together in a tight little package. It's got more rigidity. It's got, it's a better package and it lasts just as long. And it's like, there's no need to do it any other way. So I wonder if this is going to be the same thing. Like, he could be dead right about, like, you'll probably see more and more companies go down this path because it's the most economical way to do it.
Yeah, my one fear, because Tesla's goal is to be very environmentally like forward thinking, and is I had an iPad that I cracked the screen on. I took it to a repair shop, asking them like how much would it cost to repair, and that whole like touch digitizer and that whole layer is so complicated now on these newer iPads that basically if you put a crack in it, throw it away because it's not even worth it. It was like $500 to get a new screen, and it was like 600 and something to just get a new iPad. So
Yeah.
That's an iPad is one thing, but if we're talking like a car, like it takes a lot of carbon emissions, it takes a lot of resources to build a car. You'd love to keep them out on the road and be able to repair and keep them on the road. So I know Teslas are so complicated already that they do scrap pretty easily. Like it just the repair costs are so high. There's not a lot of spare parts available, things like that. So I would love to deep dive into this more. Maybe we need to get somebody who can come on as a guest and talk about this, because that is the one concern that I have, as excited as I am about everything else that they're doing.
Yeah, I agree. So you ready for the next one?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. Next story is the Tesla Semi, which has been getting a lot of news recently. Over the past like few weeks and months, there's been a lot of Tesla Semi news. And this one is there's going to be 15 vehicles supposedly delivering Pepsi later this year. This one I thought was really kind of cool because Pepsi was had a press release about how they've been going green and trying to reduce their carbon footprint. And they've talked about how they've reduced their diesel usage by 78%. They've cut greenhouse gas emissions by 53%. One of their plants is pretty much run on renewable energy or carbon credits. And they use 60 electric tractors, box trucks, yard trucks, and forklifts. And in the report, they said, and 15 remaining tractors later this year. And what I found fascinating was, I think it was Electric confirmed that those 15 remaining tractors, they confirmed with Pepsi that they are Tesla semis. And I find it interesting that they refer to them as tractors, not semis. But they're going to be getting these for this year, which is surprising to me because I wasn't sure that they were going to be coming out this year, especially because of the pandemic and things getting slowed down. I thought it might not be till next year that we'd start to see these things on the road, but since it is only 15, it's a small delivery. It's going to be really cool to actually see these things not on just a test track, but to actually see them on the roads doing deliveries and starting to make a difference.
Yeah, this is, to me, it kind of a direct tie into their 4680 supply. And we've been seeing kind of reports I've seen on Twitter that they've actually got a good line for supply, and they're actually be able to get a decent yield. So if you think about where will the 4680 cells go first, Plaid Plus Model S, the top of the line, it'll be the Semi, it'll be Cybertruck, and Roadster. Roadster, I think, is going to get pushed furthest out as the least important, I think, for the company. So you have Cybertruck coming up first, and then this. And I think this is a good move for Tesla because you've had all these other companies talking about semis and bigger commercial vehicles, and Tesla's been kind of quiet. So I think it's kind of one of those moves where like, hey, we're still here. We're doing laps around racetracks and stuff. Don't forget about us. And they're going to have some kind of a smaller contract here. Pepsi's a good starting point. They'll probably have others. And I've always said this truck wasn't possible until 4680 and structural pack and a couple of other things. Really good cooling is going to be required as well. So I think this is a look at what Tesla is going to be able to pull off when they have, and a Giga Austin. I'm not sure if they'll have lines ready this year for 4680 supply, but when they do, this is where they'll finally be able to make them because they really didn't have enough cells to make the Semi before.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much profit margin is built into one of them, but one semi or like 5 or 6 Model S's or Model 3s, right? So
Yeah. And they're not the only company building semis like this. I mean, there are still, I know it's, I'm not talking to Nikola, but there are hydrogen variants of semis coming. There are other battery electric semis coming from a bunch of different companies. There's a lot of movement here, but Tesla had a lead on everybody else, and then they just kind of went quiet with this. And so I was very excited to start seeing this kind of bubbling back up again of like, no, Tesla still has that lead. They're most likely going to have the first ones out there before the others finally start to deliver too. So I'm just excited to start seeing these on the roads.
I agree. I agree. I still think they're the most beautiful. I think some of the other companies have some cool designs, but Tesla's, I mean, that'll be cool to see that on the road. I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
Ready for the next one?
Yep.
All right. The next one is a story that I keep bringing up and I keep putting on the board. And it has to do with one of the things that has happened as a result of the pandemic is we have had a chip shortage. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. And this story in particular is about how Intel is going to start to build other people's chips. And I think this is one of the most important news stories in the last week or two. And the reason I say that is because, first of all, Intel is one of the most legendary chip makers on earth. They were the ones that pretty much pioneered this entire industry. And they've been in a bad way of late. And it started with AMD and Ryzen when they came out a couple of years ago with Ryzen. They've been losing out market share to companies like AMD for a while. So Intel has been in a little bit of a slump, and it has to do with their consumer products and even their like Xeon server stuff, because AMD has parts for that. I think it's Epic. So they've been losing market share for some time now. And under their new leadership, I think they're starting to get the memo that, we need to really get our act together. They are still a little behind in terms of they don't have like a 7 nanometer process yet. I think they're working on a 10 nanometer process, which like TSMC and Global Foundry, some of these other bigger companies have a more advanced process. But this is really important because I think the previous administration and Joe Biden and the current administration both have identified that this is a major national security issue. If we have to lean on TSMC and other international companies for our chips, that is a huge problem, because when things shift, when China and the U.S. are not as friendly as they once were, when new Chinese companies are on demand for having chips and they can't fulfill other countries' orders, things can get really bad. So Matt and I were talking before the show, there's an entire line of Chevy Colorado, the midsize pickup trucks, that are going to get shut down for like 2 weeks because they don't have these the chips that they need, these custom silicon SoCs that run their cars. So one thing is that we think of all this stuff as fancy and advanced, like, oh, Tesla has all these computers. Every car has a computer in it. Without a computer, you can't run digital fuel injection and have a map sensor for your flow rate, for your all the stuff that happens in any gas car. So this is a huge concern. And so what Intel's posing to do is start to build chips for other companies. So you have a reference design like, hey, Apple, you have an M1 you want to make. We could be one of those foundries that we can be a fab house that can build that chip design for you. The problem is they have tried this before and it didn't work out well. And the reason is because some of the tools and standardizations that people wanted to see, they weren't really hip with. They kind of wanted to and kind of push their own kind of standard. And that's what happens when you're the top dog. You don't really think of it as in quite the same way that other people might. But this to me is really crucial for Intel, because Intel is an American national treasure. Like, if you're from the US, this is a company that we can look at Intel for a lot of what has happened for us in terms of just how much computational power has evolved. And if they're going to stay relevant in the age of ARM processors and stuff, they have this cool new take on ARM, like a RISC compute set that they think could be even better than what people are doing with ARM chips and stuff. A little bit nerding out here, but the basic bottom line is we need to have companies in the US that could build computer chips. Otherwise, a national security measure is exactly what it is. Imagine if you can't build rockets or fighter aircraft and stuff because China decides, no, I don't think we're going to export any more computer chips to you guys. So this is a big move. I think Intel's making the right steps here, and I'm hoping that they can figure this out and it could be a profitable enterprise. It will be a couple years though. They're not ready for this yet, and they're still behind, so they have a lot of catching up to do before they could take customers. So it's early, but I think it's the right move.
I agree with you. I'm a little more pessimistic on this than you are. It's like I agree with you completely. It's like we need, like specifically for the United States, we need this kind of expertise happening here in the country. You laid out all the reasons why, and I completely agree with it. And having Intel building fabs in Arizona, it's like this is great, but they are so far behind when it comes to this. There's a reason that they're behind. It's like I think the best that they have is a 10 nanometer process, where TSMC is at what, 5 nanometers now? It's like everybody else is like way ahead of them. They're not only lagging behind on their processes, but one, they're not doing this. Two, it takes a couple of years to spin up a fab. It's like they are just behind every which way you look at this. So best case scenario, you're probably looking at something like 5 years down the line. Maybe they're a little competitive because they have these plants spun up and maybe they've started to catch up on the nanometer process, and this thing that they're talking about being like kind of the next generation ARM, it's like maybe that starts to pan out, but you're looking like 5 years down the line, and it's like that's a long road when you consider where the competition is today, and the competition is not standing still. So yikes. I'm a little more pessimistic on on the way things are looking for Intel, because they've been struggling badly the past few years because they keep promising their next advancements in chips, and they keeps getting delayed and delayed and delayed. That to me just shows that there's a significant issue with whatever they're doing internally that they really have to figure out. This is a step in the right direction. I'm just hoping it's not a step too late.
I hear that entirely. I think you're that's more than grounded and more than deserved. They mentioned in the article that they're building a couple of plants, I think in Arizona, and their admission, they won't even be up and running for like 2 years. So really, if everything went right, we're talking like 2023, which is a far time horizon. All that being said, I mean, what's the alternative? America would have no, silicon manufacturing capabilities, which would be really depressing, right? Because AMD doesn't make their own chips; they outsource it to Global Foundry, also I think in China. So I mean, the alternative is pretty depressing. So as far as I'm concerned, they've got to kind of get their act together. I will say this though: I've always said Intel is kind of a case study for what the importance of competition, because from like the 2010s until like 2017 when Ryzen came out, they were utterly unchallenged. There was nobody, and they just completely rested on their laurels. They shipped a 4-core i7 for year after year after year after year, and it was not until Ryzen came along that anything changed on that front. And the prices got higher, and the performance kept getting worse. People were thinking Moore's law is over. No, Intel's just not trying because they don't need to. Yeah. So I will say this is why I'm always looking for other electric vehicle makers to emerge, because I think competition is the key. It sounds crazy to think that Tesla could never get stale or stagnant, but let's say Elon, Tesla's just taking over the world and they're worth $10 billion or $10 trillion, and Elon leaves in 3 or 4 years. This could happen in Tesla as well if there's no other competition. So I think it's important to have competition, and I think it's important to have some national capacity here in the U.S. So while I'm with you, I'm just trying to be optimistic because, I mean, I don't know what else to do at this point.
Well, I do agree with that sentiment completely. It's like, well said. Well said. So you ready for the next story?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So Tesla is launching the Tesla Energy Plan in Australia with the hopes of lowering the electricity rates using a virtual power plant. And if you don't know what a virtual power plant is, it's just everybody's home batteries work together as just a big, massive, like mega pack for a city or a region. They're pretty cool. They've been rolling out in Australia. I think that was one of the first places in the world that did it. It was shortly after Elon did that interview. I think it was on 60 Minutes in Australia, where they brought up how several people in poverty in Australia couldn't afford their electricity prices. And it really hit Elon hard. And he said, we have to do better. And ever since then, he's been doing these really kind of cutting edge things in Australia with like the Hornsdale Power Reserve, with this virtual power plant system where they were going to install up to, I think it was 50,000 solar panels and power walls through people's homes. They haven't installed 50,000 from what I've seen. It's only a few thousand, but it's it's a kind of a cutting edge thing that they're doing in these locations to try to help drive prices down. And the thing that they're doing with this Tesla power plan is they're making it a very simple kind of like sign up procedure, and the sales pitch is very simple and clean. It's like if you sign up, buy your power wall, you'll get, a couple $100 every year from this pricing scheme, and you'll be having up to 50 times a year. Your power wall will help the local community by participating in the virtual power plant system. So this whole system is very actually similar to what's happening. It's very similar to what's happening in my area. It's like in my area, I'm part of a virtual power plant system with my power wall. It's called Connected Solutions, and it works very much the same way. There's a limit, I think, of 20 or 30 times during the summer that they can take advantage of your power wall. In the winter, I think it's like 5 times. And depending on how much energy you're contributing to the system, you get a kickback at the end of the year. And this is a very similar system that's just a very nicely packaged kind of marketing plan, really trying to kind of sell it to people to get them to buy in, because it really does help to reduce the cost of owning a power wall, because it's expensive up front, but programs like this really help to pay it off very quickly. So you don't have to wait 8 or 9 years to get that payback from your solar and battery. It's going to be much shorter because you're participating in a community virtual power plant system. This is it's very cool news. I just like to see what they're doing, trying to make this very easily palatable to the public. It's very easy to understand what they're packaging here.
Yeah, and they've been kind of slowly inching toward this where, they now have their own inverters that they designed. They used to use, I think it was Solar Edge. Now they have their own.
Yep.
It's kind of been building to this point. My question is really about kind of battery capacity. I think I'm wondering if some of the battery supply that they get from like CATL or some of the other companies in China are at play for how, for what goes into the power walls. I'm not sure if they covered that or what goes into it, but this is an example of where a power wall or solar isn't a nice to have. Like for you and I, well, this could be debated because if there was a power outage, it wouldn't be nice to have. But the reality is, in my last 10 years of where I live, we've been without power maybe twice for a couple of hours or something. If I had no solar and no battery, we would have been okay. But there are regions in the world where this is not a nice to have. This is kind of the backbone of how you bring any sort of reliability to a power grid. Hawaii comes to mind as well. Places where you can't just like tie into other people's grids. You're kind of on an island, if you will. So they've had issues with like fires, and it's a tough part of the world. The outback. There's the energy population is kind of densely packed in one region, and the generation happens elsewhere. It's been a tough problem, and Tesla is now coming in and being the solution, which to me is more than just making money in terms of like, the next time we see their earnings report, we always talk about how much battery supply they're so that those numbers are going to keep going up, which is great. But even just the PR, like Tesla and battery solves the day. That's what I think.
Yes.
We need more people to hear instead of windmills are cute. What was the quote? Windmills are cute fashion accessories that freeze when they get cold. So I just love what they're doing. I think, and you mentioned that they're using the virtual power plant. I wonder if there's any like auto bidder action going on or how that's playing into it.
From what I understand, it's I don't know if it is auto bidder, but it's systems like that. It's kind of a machine learning thing that's happening that triggers it and organizes everything together and figures out how everything's going to work. And that's the other side of it is like these are proven now. It's like the Hornsdale Power Reserve proved itself in less than a year, having basically earned its keep in what it's doing. And these virtual power plant systems are doing the same exact thing. And so it's like we have the roadmap. The proof is now here. It's not a speculation of, does this work? It's like, we know it works. It works here. It works over here. It's working in Australia. It's working here in New England. It's like, roll it out everywhere, everybody. We have the game plan. Let's just do it.
James Paul says it's like a battery timeshare, Matt, without the scam.
Yes.
That's pretty good. Exactly. And I really hope that other companies start to make Powerwall equivalent kind of things. Lucid Motors mentioned they have some kind of ESS. I want to see that. I want to see other people who have the battery tech or the battery supply start to do this, because that is an incredibly valuable thing for our future. So my video was on nuclear fusion, and I kind of joked in the video. It's like you either have some sort of a grid, like a stable baseline power generation, like nuclear fusion, or if you're going to go solar and wind, then you got to have a lot of batteries. And here's Tesla saying, forget the future and potentially always 10 years away. Let's go solve this problem now. And it's a really, really cool story.
Yeah. One of the last things I want to bring up is about virtual power plants. Part of why I'm super excited about them is they're so much easier to roll out for utility because you don't have to purchase or lease land to build a massive battery pack system on it. And there's no maintenance fees around it. It's because it's in people's homes. It's like you just have to incentivize, put this battery in your home and let us borrow it like X number of times a year. And there's no weird licensing or anything going on. It's so simple to roll it out quickly, get it in people's homes. It's a very, very fast and effective solution.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So last story.
I want to see more of those. Yeah. So last up is a good feel-good story about, here's a picture of a Lucid Air and a Tesla, looks like a Model Y, and they're getting along because this story is about how Tesla, Lucid, Rivian, I mean, they just name off some brands, but really EVs in general, scored a big win with Connecticut, which has now allowed electric vehicles to sell direct to consumer, much like they are able to do in other states. So before this, people who lived in Connecticut, and if there's anybody from Connecticut in the comment section, we'd love to hear from you. You'd have to go to some other state to buy it. Like I think we probably met some people at Fully Charged who lived in Texas who were forced to go buy their Tesla in another state.
It's insane.
And bring it back home, which is absurd. But we've talked about in the past these kinds of, so this is the bill is SB 127 here. These kinds of initiatives are not going to be easy because the car dealership lobby is very powerful, and far too much of a state's taxes come from car sales, right? I mean, when you buy a new car for $30,000, you're paying $3,000-$4,000 in taxes. And so they are historically a huge contributor to the tax revenue for any state. That's what helps them to yield the kind of power that they do. So to wield the kind of power that they do. So this was a huge moment. And I think I kind of liken this to the legalization of marijuana. Both just kind of seem inevitable. And there's far too much pushback. And I mean, you can be the lawmaker who's opposing this, and it'll just look bad for you in 5 years. That's the way I look at it. I'm still hearing pushback on legalizing marijuana, which, again, to me is absurd. Not everyone's opinions are welcome, and it's good. To me, it just seems like a no-brainer, and this does too. It won't be easy. It won't make everyone happy. In the article, they cite things like, they're not completely crazy. They mention things like the fact that EVs have no moving parts. The motor and drivetrain have 20 moving parts compared to 2,000 in a gas car. And what they're saying is a lot of our revenue comes from selling a gas car and then getting all of that reaped maintenance along the way. And all that is kind of gone. And that is true. There's going to be some disruptions that happen in that regard. So it's funny that this is still a thing. There's still a handful of states that are pushing back,
10.
but
10 states. It's insane that there's 10 states.
But at the same time, only 10. I mean, really, if you look back to if we rewound time to the GM EV1 days, and you asked people around that era, like, hey, how long do you think it'll be before you could do that? People might have really been surprised to hear that only 10 are holding back at this point, because we have come a long ways. But yeah, there's still a ways to go. And it's still important to celebrate the victories.
So now we're down to 9. Just 9 more to go. It's this whole I love this story because it's just like, yay, another one down, 9 to go. It's just insane to me. It's just, this is where lobbies, like, it's like the dealerships have such a stranglehold on this. And I get why they're doing this, because it's their death knell as far as, dealerships are concerned. And they know that, because EVs are just going to destroy how they make their money, because most of them make their money through service departments. And when EVs don't need as much service as a gasoline car, you're going to see your profits go down, and it's just going to really hurt their businesses. So I get why they're resistant, but at the same time, it's just such common sense of like, I'm a customer, I want to buy a car, and you're not letting me buy this. Why can't I buy this car? Like, oh, that's buying it from them directly? Wait, what? It's like, that makes no sense. It's like, you can buy your phone directly from Apple. Why can't I buy my car directly from Tesla? It just makes zero sense. So it's great to see that it's like another domino falling. Hopefully the rest of them will start to fall quickly after this.
Once you buy a car online where there's no haggling and no BS, you don't have to call your friend and say, "Hey, what did you pay for it? You paid what?" And my guy's not off. Once you get rid of all that and you buy a car, it's really hard to imagine going back. Like if we had to buy a gas car for some reason, I think I'd have a thought of the dealer and go, you know what, forget it. We'll just walk or take an Uber or something. But if you could go back to my screen, here's a little, I highlighted a little section where they talk about this. Um, you know, some of the lobbyists, some of the people, the proponents or the people who are against us say EVs don't have fan belts, spark plugs, or engines. It has a battery, which isn't exactly the equivalent there, but a transmission, radiator, or other things common that ICE car owners would have to take care of. So he says, as a result of this, electric cars don't just don't that much. They don't need that much maintenance. Gas cars corporations hate the thought of these clean, beautiful, reliable electric cars. They lobby our lawmakers to keep Tesla and other EV companies out of the state just to protect their cash cow. But the dealership's ban comes at the expense of the planet's future and the state's residents. So I think that sums it up exactly.
Yeah, I think that was David. I think it was David Pogue that you just read the quote there from. It was yeah. That's okay, I love that. That's a great quote. It's insane. Yeah, it's just insane. It's like I bought my car on my phone and put my down payment using Apple Pay. It's like, and it took 2 seconds. It was like boom boom. And after it was done, it was kind of like, that's it. I've got my car's already ordered. This is kind of insane because the last time I did that with buying a car, I had to sit in a dealership for like an hour in like the manager's office, filling out all this paperwork. And it was just like, then they would go to a different office and then leave me there for 10 minutes and walk back in and go, yeah, we just talked to the manager and we can do this for you. It's like, just sell me the car. It's like, I just want to buy the car and get out of here. And this was a completely joyous experience. 30 seconds and I'm done and my car's ordered and I just have to wait for it to show up.
Yeah, really. And the way the article is written, it's kind of like, there's no moving parts, there's nothing to break. What are we going to fix? It's like, yeah, poor thing. What are we going to do?
I feel bad for you.
But, I understand. Like, there's probably some people who have some heartburn thinking about, like, if you ever see a smog shop, like, on your, as you're driving around your town, they're not going to be around when we have all EVs. There's just no reason to. And all the little Jiffy Lube and all the little oil change shops and stuff. But one thing I always say is we used to have to wash our clothes by hand, and when we didn't have to do that anymore, we just found new, better ways to spend our time. So I think the kinds of companies that are in the business of gas repairs and maintenance now, they're gonna have to pivot. They're gonna have to go through a little bit of a transition. It's not going to be easy, but I think the future is they're gonna figure out. They're gonna figure out how they fit into the EV world, and I think it'll be better than they think.
Yeah. I like Katie's comment. You both are way too positive. You need to be a warrior war like me to balance you guys out.
Yeah. So that's Dusty. He's one of our fans. We need to have Dusty on the show, and he can balance us out. But yeah, it's going to be good.
That's the end of that was the last story. So now we're wrapping up. We're moving into the Q&A portion of the show. So we'll start combing through the comments, chime in. And as always, if you haven't subscribed or hit that like button, make sure you hit that like button. There's 248 people on the stream right now. Hit that like button. Let's get higher than 66. Come on.
Let's go. Yeah. I think we hit a record last week. I think it was 100 and something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see if we can't get higher. James Paul says, I've heard some Ford dealers charged huge markups on Mach-E. This may become common with low EV production volume for many brands. And God, that must drive you crazy. If you're Ford and you're trying and you're building an EV and maybe you're self-strained or something else, and now dealers are taking your affordable car and what do you do at that point, right? And you can't control it. It is true, though. I drove a Mach-E here in San Diego from a gentleman who has his car on Turo. And he told me he paid $5,000 over MSRP. And that was after negotiating it down from the $10,000 that the dealer wanted. The dealer wanted $10,000 above MSRP for this car.
That's insane.
And people wonder why they hate dealers.
It's like I would rather have the Tesla approach where we see the prices shifting like month to month at times, but it's like little shifts. It's $1,000 here, $1,000 there. And it's like, but that's what everybody pays. It's like, you know what you're getting. It's like with dealerships, it's literally like 2 towns over, the car could be $5,000 more expensive.
I know. The Tesla price changing thing, I do find it a bit odd. Like, just pick a price and just leave it alone.
Yeah.
Like, stop messing with it too much, because there's just, I don't know. I think less in terms of price action, I think, is better. We have the stock market, all right? We have enough. I don't need to hedge my car buying too now.
Well, we're at 117 likes. Wow, that jumped up.
Wow,
quick.
that was okay. That jumped
up.
Now
really
we're cooking
fast.
with gas. And because of that, we will take the next question. So Grizzly asks, he says, address silicon replacing graphite, please. So he's talking about in the anode of lithium-ion battery. So even now, Tesla is doing, look at that.
Yeah,
on
trying
screen.
something new. Trying something new.
That is so cool. Thank you, Bill O'Bar, for your super chat as well. We'll get to that. So Tesla is already doing a hybrid silicon anode. The benefits is silicon has far greater capacity for storing these ions than graphite does. But the problem is that the structure of silicon allows it to expand when it takes and charges and discharges. So as a result, you have a volumetric expansion, which is not what you want in a battery pack. So what they're doing is it's like a hybrid. They have like some percentage of silicon, but the future probably is just a lithium metal anode.
Yeah,
which
silicon breaks itself apart.
With,
it literally breaks itself apart because it expands and contracts so much.
Right.
But it's one of the best ways to do it. Lithium, I agree. Lithium metal is probably where things are going to go, especially with solid state.
And until that happens, you're going to see people who come up with new ways of adding more and more silicon while restricting that expansion and controlling as much as possible.
Yep.
You want to take Bill's question?
Let's see. Is Tesla already building Model Ys in Berlin? Already? I actually don't know. Do you know?
I don't know. Who? If anybody in the comment section knows, we'd love to hear it. So Giga Berlin is nearly ready to rock, and I'd imagine it could be any time now. The timetables are actually kind of falling like they did last year with the Model Y originally. I think it's going to be kind of similar, but in the next month or two, I think it could definitely happen. And that'll be a big volume car for Europe.
So Tommy said, Elon said more superchargers for all cars. What do you guys think?
Does that mean opening it up to other cars?
I don't know. I'm not sure. If that's what you're talking about, I would say, yeah, we should be doing that. 100%.
So the tricky thing with Tesla's network approach, they have a first mover's advantage and they have the supercharger network. And I'm not going to lie, it's probably the thing that keeps me thinking Tesla above everybody else. Mm-hmm. I have a video. I'm doing a live video with Ryan, one of my friends from the Kilowatts, about an EV buying guide. He has tons of EVs that he puts out on Turo. And so he just has so much experience with a lot of these cars on hand. And we've driven quite a few of these as well now. So we're doing like kind of an EV buying guide. And one of the things that he did in his video, I'll put a link in the description. The Kilowatts is the name of the channel. But he did a video on the Mach-E. And what he found is that you go to an Electrify America network and you plug in. The Mach-E charges decently, not the fastest by any means. Ford is very conservative. They're trying to keep these batteries as long-lasting as possible to make the warranty more reliable. But it charges to 80%, like you kind of expect DC fast charging. And then the speed plummets to like level 2 levels. So what he found was it took 3 hours to charge his battery at Electrify America stop. And this is not Electrify America centric. This is a Mach-E thing. It hits 80% SOC and it has this profile. It kicks in and it just goes into like super slow charging mode.
Because they want you to
on
unplug and move on. They want you to stop.
It's partly that, but again, it's not Electrify America. Electrify America
Ford,
is happy to have you, but Ford doesn't want you charging it past 80. And even the usable capacity that they have a 100 kilowatt hour battery pack, but the usable capacity is shrunk down. They're just freaked out by this battery, and they don't want you bringing it in because the degradation has been too much, and they got to replace it. They don't want that, and they're going to such a great length that the range of the car and the performance and road tripping is greatly compromised. I think Ford will ease up into this. This is their first foray, so
yeah.
But the supercharger network is something that they're going to have to figure out a balance between all that capital expenditure to keep building more of them versus, do we really need to get in the game of building chargers? Can't we just let our cars charge anywhere? And as we have more EVs, they'll have that option, but we'll see.
Ed said apparently they're opening it up if you bring an adapter for the charging.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, John Check, for your super chat. He says Berlin is not finished yet. Yeah, so Berlin's not finished yet. I'm kind of curious. I'm sure the Model Y line will be one of the first things that they get up and running. So we'll see how long it takes for that to happen. So this is I'm going to start with you. I actually like this question a lot. Grizzly asks, in 5 years, what will we all forehead slap about? Like I can't. Are we still doing this? Is this still a thing? So you go first. I'm curious. In 5 years, what are we still like? We haven't learned. We're still doing the same stupid thing.
Oh man, I'm gonna think about that for a second. What do you think?
There's probably some depressing answers in there, like I think 5 years from now in the U.S. anyway, the gun violence, it'll be the same kind of storylines and headlines, and it'll be the same platitudes, and very little will change. I like to think that in terms of like the technology or like electric vehicles and stuff that we're going to be learning, and I think the environment is maybe in better hands, but there's just some political stuff that I don't have much faith in, to be honest. What about you? It's a good question. That might be the best question you've ever gotten, actually.
Grizzly, you broke me. You broke me because now my head doesn't know where to focus because there's just so
we'll
much
come back.
Stuff.
I do want to hear something from Matt, so we'll come back to that one. And in an interesting move along Tesla's route, Rivian is going to do a proprietary network as well, which I think is the wrong move. I really think, I don't know. I'd like to see more standardization. I think for the industry to really take it to the next level, they need to all be kind of following common standards, I think, so we could all benefit. There's always going to be that one time when you're in a random area of town where there's no branded charger for your network, and you're going to have to go plug in somewhere, and you'd hate to have it be level 2 or something and take 10 hours to charge.
DJ Corza, in 5 years, my forehead slap about coal-fired power stations still being used. I'd agree with that 100%. It's going to be amazing how, like, in 5 years, it's like there's still going to be people saying electric vehicles don't work, or, wind power's killing all the birds. It doesn't work. You know what I mean? It's like that's still going to be happening in 5 years. And it's going to be like, there's 5 years of proof that this is working great.
5 years from now, I'm more optimistic. I don't think we're going to have coal peaker plants. I think it'll be natural gas. And honestly, by then, at the rate we're building battery factories, what does the world look like in 5 years? I'm excited. I'm optimistic. Call me crazy, but thank you, Hugh Waller, for the super chat. He just says electing politicians. Well, electing the right politicians definitely matters and definitely makes sense. I'm not sure what the context was. Maybe maybe Hugh, you can chime in again, but yes.
Here we go. Here's the winning combo for me. In 5 years, Toyota will still be pushing fuel cell and hydrogen tech.
Or the self-charging hybrid.
Yeah, there we go.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That is so moronic. But there's some person out there who's like, hey, did you hear about this? You know, Bill and his Tesla, he has to go home and charge it. This Prius charges itself. And there's somebody that made a choice based on it. I'm sure of it.
I do have to defend fuel cells and hydrogen, though, because it's like there is a really cool place for that technology in the future, just not in passenger cars.
Exactly.
But there's definitely a use for it.
And I actually think when it comes to that, the entire stack of, running motors from the back end of it from a fuel cell, Toyota's one of the most advanced probably around.
Yeah.
Don't fall for all the Nikola BS. Like Toyota's really got some hardcore engineering around it. So if they're going to invest in that and see what kind of progress they make there, I'm okay with that because, yeah, there's going to be some other applications that maybe they can benefit from it. So Hugh, who had the super chat earlier, says politicians lie. Yeah, so electing politicians, it's that is a can of worms for another show.
Yeah, so thanks for the super chat, Nitro. The head slap may be the shortage of nickel 5 years from now.
Yeah, no, that's a fair one. Fair to be sure. I wonder what other standards or other kinds of lithium-ion tech are going to emerge and what other chemistry formulations we'll come up with. But I think we're clever. I think people will adjust and make concessions here and there. And maybe it's not all about energy density, but for the average car, it'll be lithium iron phosphate, which is very abundant and very easy to make. And we're going to figure this out. I'm optimistic. Gary,
there's some great comments. There's some great comments.
This is great.
You're kind of killing me.
You see what happens when you hit the like button? Just a general comment. Like we're having such a good time, you know. And we're up at 130 likes. Thank you to Karoma for the super chat. I don't think I've seen you before, so if you're new, thank you for joining us. They ask, do you think any OEMs will end up merging if they can't catch up alone to the likes of Tesla? It happens all the time. Like automotive companies don't just go bankrupt. Like you have billions of dollars in like factories and like there's just way too much value to you. So yeah, you'll get bought up and merged around, kind of like what Fiat and Chrysler have done for decades. You know, like the ones that aren't as good kind of shift around. So I think absolutely. And even if, like, imagine if like maybe, you know, Tesla's using the NUMMI plant, which used to be an old GM and Toyota plant that they sold to Tesla when, you know, back in the day. Imagine if Tesla suddenly had all kinds of new factories. There's a lot of retooling, so it's not like you could just turn it on and start building EVs, but think about how quickly they could progress their mission. So yeah, I think there will be some merging. What about you?
I agree completely with that. I think there's going to be a consolidation of these smaller OEMs that can't cut it. They're just going to get absorbed into other companies and bought up. There's going to be a mass consolidation of things. I think in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years especially, it's going to be a lot of consolidation.
Dusty Green says, I have nickel in my backyard and nobody knows. So I think Dusty is going to be retiring pretty soon. Just, I'll come stay with you. Michael, thank you for joining us again. He says, I watched a pros and cons video about owning a Tesla, and the girl says she has range anxiety, doesn't let the battery go below 50%. The best thing to do if you've never driven an electric car really is check out Turo, see if they have any where you live. and rent one for 5 days, like maybe some work days, some weekend, and just go and charge and drive and go places and see how you feel. Because I will say there's one hairy situation that we got into. I Turo my Tesla out because it's the best way to evangelize EVs. A lot of the people who rent from me end up buying. But there's one guy who went up into the mountains to go skiing, and he was going uphill. It was freezing cold. He was running his heater, and he's flooring it and having fun. It's a fun car. And he got really close, and he was stressing me out. I was laying in bed looking at the numbers, like, go charge. Can you slow down? And he got to
So wait, you were having the range anxiety for somebody else driving?
Yes. He was chill. He was out the whole time. When he came back, I was like, dude, I felt like the anxiety on your trip, because he didn't really plan it well. It wasn't like he couldn't have been done in an electric car, but it was just a little bit tricky. I was about to like refund him his entire trip. I was like, I feel so bad for this whole. He's like, are you crazy? This is the most amazing car ever. He was like, he couldn't believe how amazing it was. And so, it's something that you have to just kind of start to get into and understand. And as long as you've got supercharger network along your route and you can charge in 30 minutes, there's no range anxiety. It's the other stuff up into the mountains for skiing. It's that kind of small stuff that could impact you.
Yep. Well, this is an interesting one from Frank Fox. What are the biggest threats to Tesla stock? Elon stepping down, full self-driving beta accidents, China bans due to security camera issues with new battery yields. The number one, I think you hit the first one. Elon stepping down, I think is going to send everybody into a flip out mode. Unless they start working that in now. Like when Steve Jobs was sick and he was starting to kind of edge himself out of the business, Tim Cook became the front man. Steve Jobs was still there, and then he slowly phased back a little bit more and more and more. I have a feeling Elon, if they're smart, they'll start doing that. Like whoever's the next person will start to get groomed and will start to become more prevalent in quarterly calls leading up to the time, so that when they finally do say, I'm out, it's like the world doesn't freak out, because we're all very used to this transition that's happened slowly. I don't have faith that's going to happen, though. I think it's going to be kind of like a Band-Aid ripping off whenever he decides to step out, which is going to cause a lot of heartache. It's going to freak everybody out. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right about that point. That is a point that is almost even hard to understand or predict. I think that's going to be, I don't even want to think about that one. But Frank, just that question in general, I think captures it exactly.
Yes.
He hit it. He hit every shareholder concern about the next year perfectly. The China issues are interesting. Largely it's about their military vehicles, which no government is going to have a foreign contractor product that has cameras and listening devices and an LTE connection in any of their military applications. We wouldn't do that either. Not that we would buy anything from China anyway, but if we did, you can rest assured it would not be part of our DoD contract. So that's not a huge deal, but general, I kind of feel China and the U.S. are kind of on a collision course a little bit, which is worrying because China's the largest car market. So that's a huge concern. The other one I thought was a great call out was, the beta accidents. I'm not too worried about that. I think the media will kind of blow it out of proportion, but then you remember that what's the alternative? What are you guys all doing? Nothing. Like you're all sitting there doing nothing while we're solving self-driving. I think that one will be okay, but
I agree on that.
Great question.
There's going to be a lot of blow up when those accidents happen. The press is going to make it sound like it's the end of the world. They're going to have politicians that'll go onto the Senate floor and make stupid comments about it, but I don't think it's going to have a lasting effect on the company. But I think that list I think it's also in priority order, which I think is pretty funny. It's
I think he's
from the worst one to the least worst one, but they're all bad. So it's like
I think he's in finance or something, because that was a fantastic question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Grizzly, for the super chat. He says, massive, empowering entrepreneurialism, opportunities for all. Get your share. We're all better off when you do. I agree. If you have an idea or if you're an entrepreneur, there's never been a better time in the world. There are people with money dying to give it to you to go try something cool, especially if you've got a good idea. So if you've got an idea, get your Shark Tank moment on and definitely try it out. Gary has a great question. Are the car rental companies renting EVs? I have never seen one. And
I've never seen one either.
I don't think so. I think there's just too much teaching. I think they'd be nervous that you'd have to like re-educate the user on charging and stuff. I felt that when I toured my car out, that if you go to this, like they think, oh, I'll go here and charge. That's a level 2. It'll take 8 hours to charge. I don't think you're going to want to go there. So there's some like education involved. They don't want to get into that business. So I think no. If you're on travel and you want to try it, get on Turo, and you'll probably find some Model S's and X's and stuff. There's a lot of them on Turo. Observer says, then you can swap the packs instead of waiting to charge. We've talked about this before. I think we were in agreement. I'm not a huge proponent of the battery swap. I think you then have to have like 3x batteries per car kind of a model where you need to have you have to have like a floating supply of batteries that are charging in stalls instead of being installed in cars. So if you think of it like that, then you'd be taking EVs off the road to accomplish that, especially in this early time when we don't have enough cell supply.
Well, it's actually time for us to start wrapping up.
Already? That flew by really quickly. All right, 3 more people hit like, and we'll have 150, which I think will be a new record. And we're almost at 300 people watching, which I think is also a record.
Yeah, it's
incredibly awesome to all of you guys that are watching. Thank you. We have time for one more. Let's do one more question. Yeah, battery swap infrastructure. Or maybe I think I'm seeing a general trend about kind of like recycling and what do you do with old scrap damaged cars. That should be something that we should try to touch on more. Do you have any videos planned, by the way, about battery recycling? I know you do.
It's on the agenda. I'm not sure when it's going to happen, but I have a bunch of research already done on it. I just have to sit down and actually start to pull it together. But yeah, I'm going to have stuff on that coming up. What about you?
Yeah, my wife has lined up a interview with Li-Cycle, so we will be interviewing them next week. But same thing as you. I think it'll be a while for me to put it together into a package that we could release. But coming soon. We haven't forgot. It's just a really involved topic. That's the nature of it.
Well, we got to wrap it up. So,
Rob says, where do babies come from? Rob, I'm with you, man. I have no idea.
The stork. Come on.
Yeah.
So thanks so much, everybody, for watching and hanging out. This has been a really fun night. There's a lot of fun questions in here. It's a lively bunch that we've had tonight. It's fantastic. So thanks so much. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button, the like button, hit that bell so you don't miss out the notifications. We do this live every Thursday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And if you're interested in listening on the go, we have viceversa.show where you can download the podcast. And thanks again to everybody. We'll see you in the next one.